The Bigfoot of Tennessee, giants of the American frontier. In the dense forests of 1770s Tennessee, a massive figure moved through the wilderness with surprising grace. Thomas Sharp Spencer, weighing nearly 400 pounds, lived alone in a hollow sycamore tree, surviving where others dared not venture. While most men traveled in groups for safety, Spencer walked the dangerous paths alone, carrying weapons that would strain two normal men. His footprints in the mud were so large they once sent a French trader fleeing in terror, convinced that giants roamed these untamed lands. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories, where we uncover the raw, true stories of America's frontier. If you're fascinated by the untold tales of early American history, join our community by subscribing to the channel. The summer of 1769 marked the beginning of an extraordinary chapter in Tennessee's history. 14 seasoned frontiersmen gathered in the wilderness, their arrival heralding a new era of exploration and conflict. These men, Caspar Mansker, John Rains, Abraham Bledsoe, John Baker, Joseph Drake, James Knox, Obadiah Terrell, Uriah Stone, Henry Smith, Ned Cowan, Robert Crockett, Thomas Gordon, Cash Brook, and Humphrey Hogan, would become known as the Long Hunters. Their extended expeditions, lasting months or even years in the unexplored territory. The wilderness they entered was unlike anything they had known before. The landscape stretched endlessly before them, vast forests teeming with game, pristine rivers cutting through valleys, and mountains reaching toward the sky. Their journey began at New River in southwestern Virginia, where they gathered their supplies, rifles gleaming with fresh oil, powder horns filled to the brim, and enough ammunition to last through months of hunting. From Virginia, they carved their way through the wilderness. The rushing waters of the Holston River guided them west, its current a constant companion as they traversed the North Fork. The crossing of Clinch and Powell Rivers tested their resolve, each man knowing that a single misstep could mean death in the swirling waters. Cumberland Gap opened before them like a gateway to another world, its towering walls standing sentinel as they passed through into Kentucky's rich hunting grounds. Their main camp arose at Price's Meadow in Wayne County, Kentucky, a strategic location 6 miles from present-day Monticello. This became their base of operations, a place to store their precious cargo of furs and game. From here, they split into smaller groups, each venture taking them deeper into unexplored territory. Some crossed the invisible line that would later mark Tennessee's border, pushing south toward Caney Fork River. They discovered lands of incredible abundance, valleys that would later become Putnam, White, and DeKalb counties. The rushing waters of what they named Obie River, honoring their companion Obadiah Terrell, became their primary hunting ground, its banks in Clay, Jackson, Overton, and Pickett counties yielding more game than they had ever seen. But the land's bounty came at a terrible price. Robert Crockett, returning to camp as dusk painted the sky in deep purples and grays, never saw the danger waiting in the shadows. Along the headwaters of Roaring River, a band of 6 to 8 warriors had laid their trap with practiced patience. The crack of rifles shattered the evening calm, and Crockett fell, becoming the first white casualty in Middle Tennessee's frontier history. This single event marked a turning point. The relationship between settlers and natives, already tense, took on a darker tone. The wilderness that had seemed so full of promise now held a deadly edge. Yet men like Spencer and Mansker continued to push deeper into the territory, knowing that each step they took was writing a new chapter in American history. Their footsteps would soon be followed by waves of settlers, each bringing their own dreams of carving out a life in this wild and beautiful land. The Tennessee wilderness of 1770 presented a hunter's paradise unlike any other. Thick carpets of high grass swayed beneath towering trees, their ancient trunks wrapped in dense undergrowth. In this pristine landscape, the Long Hunters developed sophisticated techniques to secure their prey. The most common method was still hunting, a practice requiring infinite patience and skill. Hunters would stand motionless for hours, becoming one with the forest until their prey ventured close enough for a clean shot. Some hunters mastered the art of mimicry, perfectly replicating the plaintive bleat of a fawn to lure curious deer within range. At night, they constructed wooden scaffolds near the salt lakes, waiting in silence as deer and elk emerged from the shadows to drink. Winter brought its own hunting methods. When deep snow covered the ground, some hunters strapped on snowshoes and practiced crusting, pursuing game until it tired in the deep drifts. This controversial technique divided the hunting parties, with many considering it unsporting and refusing to participate. As spring approached in 1770, the party split into three groups. Some headed home, weary from months in the wilderness. James Knox led another group northward into Kentucky's rich hunting grounds. But it was Caspar Mansker's group, including Stone, Baker, Gordon, Brooke, Hogan, and several others, who embarked on the most ambitious journey, following the Cumberland River toward Natchez, Mississippi. Their stop at French Lick, where Nashville now stands, revealed a landscape teeming with life. Vast herds of buffalo dominated the hills, their deep bellows echoing through forests packed with elk and deer. The abundance stood in stark contrast to the meager hunting in the upper country. Here they replenished their supplies and crafted new boat coverings from fresh hides. At the trading post, they encountered Timothy Damon Brune, a pioneer who had established himself there a decade earlier. The river journey brought both fortune and misfortune. Near the Ohio River, Indian raiders stripped some of their boats of supplies. Yet Providence smiled upon them when they encountered French traders who generously provided flour, salt, tobacco, and their prized drink tafa to replace what was lost. Natchez, then a Spanish outpost near New Orleans, marked the end of their river odyssey. Here they sold their hard-earned cargo of hides, furs, oil, and tallow. While Mansker and Baker chose to return to New River, Virginia, others sailed to North Carolina or settled in Natchez. Their tales of Cumberland's abundance sparked a fever for Western exploration among the colonists. In a curious twist, Uriah Stone discovered his long-lost boat in Natchez, stolen years before by French thieves on the river that now bears his name. By fall 1771, the wilderness called Mansker back to Tennessee. He assembled a new party including Isaac Bledsoe, John Montgomery, Joseph Drake, James Knox, Henry Suggs, William Allen, Christopher Stoff, and the Lynch brothers, William and David. Among them was an elderly hunter named Russell, who compensated for his failing eyesight by attaching white paper to his gun's muzzle, a simple yet effective solution that allowed him to continue his hunting pursuits. The elderly Russell proved his worth despite his failing eyesight, bringing down deer after deer with his paper-marked rifle. His success demonstrated the ingenuity and determination that defined these frontier hunters, men who refused to let any obstacle stand in their way. In the heart of what would become Sumner County, Mansker's group established their main camp near a winding creek, close to Dr. Anderson's future residence along the Gallatin-Nashville Turnpike. This strategic location would later give Station Camp Creek its name, marking the beginning of permanent settlement in the region. Life at the camp tested every ounce of their frontier experience. The bitter winter forced them to construct shelters from animal skins, layering pelts to keep out the biting wind and driving snow. They developed a routine of leaving guards to protect their valuable stores while hunting parties ranged across what would become Sumner, Robertson, David, Wilson, Smith, and Trousdale counties. Yet even their careful planning couldn't prevent disaster. One fateful day, when every hunter was out tracking game, 25 Cherokee warriors descended on the unguarded camp. The raiders moved with practiced efficiency, stripping the camp of everything valuable: cooking pots, precious ammunition, and nearly 500 carefully preserved deerskins. Even the hunters' spare clothing vanished into the wilderness. The Cherokees' tactical brilliance showed in their retreat. While their entry trail stood out clearly in the earth, their exit vanished like smoke. Some theorized they had split up, each warrior taking a different path, while others believed they had waded upstream through Station Camp Creek, leaving no tracks to follow. As the hunters explored this rich territory, they left their names written on the land itself. Each discovery of a mineral lick or promising creek earned the finder's name, creating a living map of their explorations. Mansker's name graced both a lick and a creek, as did Isaac Bledsoe and Joseph Drake's. The tradition continued with Michael Stoner, a Dutch hunter from Pittsburgh, earning his place on the map, while George Flynn's discoveries and Colonel Samuel Barton's contributions were similarly commemorated in Wilson County. The abundance of game that year defied belief. When Isaac Bledsoe first came upon the lick that would bear his name, now Castalian Springs, the sight stopped him dead in his tracks. The valley around the Sulphur Spring heaved with such massive herds of buffalo that Bledsoe dared not dismount, fearing he'd be crushed under their restless hooves. Mansker's own discoveries near Goodlettsville, 2 mineral licks about 300 yards apart, proved equally remarkable. In a single day, moving between these upper and lower licks, he brought down 19 deer. Such success seemed almost supernatural to later generations, but it spoke to both the hunter's skill and the untouched abundance of the land. When their ammunition finally ran low, they left for their eastern homes with a fortune in furs and the satisfaction of a successful season. But the wilderness called Mansker back again. By November 1775, he led another party, including 2 men named Bryant, back through Cumberland Gap. They made camp at Mansker's Lick, his discovery from 1771 serving as a familiar waypoint in the wild territory. While most of the party soon returned to Virginia, Mansker and 3 companions stayed behind. They pushed their hunting and trapping operations into new territory, working the Sulphur Fork and Red River in what would become Robertson and Montgomery counties. The discovery of Blackfish Indians hunting nearby forced them to exercise extreme caution. In frontier warfare, information meant survival. The tension in the wilderness reached its breaking point near the banks of Red River. Mansker, chosen for his stealth and woodcraft, crept through the forest to spy on the Blackfish Indians' camp. His moccasined feet made no sound as he moved from tree to tree, each step bringing him closer to the enemy's firelight. Through the dancing shadows, he counted only 2 warriors sitting by the flames. The rest of their party must be out hunting, he reasoned, deciding to wait and observe. Minutes stretched like hours as he stood motionless, becoming one with the forest shadows. Suddenly, one warrior rose, grabbed his tomahawk, and crossed the river, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Fate had other plans that night. The remaining warrior, shouldering his gun, began walking directly toward Mansker's hiding spot. The hunter's heart pounded as the distance closed. 15 yards, 10 yards, 5. There was no choice left. In one fluid motion, Mansker raised his rifle and fired. The shot shattered the night's silence. The wounded warrior's death cry echoed through the trees. His gun clattered to the ground as he staggered past his camp, pitching headlong over the bluff into the dark waters below. The sound of splashing water had barely faded when Mansker and the returning warrior both sprinted for the abandoned camp. Mansker's longer legs carried him there first. He snatched up a discarded gun, but when he pulled the trigger, only a useless flash in the pan resulted. The second warrior melted into the darkness. Dawn revealed a changed landscape. During the night, the surviving warrior had returned, honoring his fallen brother with a proper burial. The camp was stripped clean, furs, utensils, and supplies loaded onto a horse whose tracks led westward. Though they followed the trail for miles, the warrior had vanished like morning mist. This deadly encounter marked the first Indian casualty at the hands of white settlers in Middle Tennessee. But the wilderness wasn't finished writing its story. As Mansker's group returned to Virginia, a new figure emerged on the frontier, Thomas Sharp Spencer. The spring of 1776 found Spencer, drawn by Mansker and Bledsoe's tales of rich lands and abundant game, making his way into the Cumberland Valley. With his companion Holiday and others, he established a station at Bledsoe's Lick, transforming virgin land into the first farm in Middle Tennessee. Through the summer months, they explored the surrounding wilderness while tending their precious corn crop, the first grains ever cultivated in the region. But frontier life wasn't for everyone. As autumn approached, Holiday's resolve crumbled, and he decided to return east. Spencer, showing the compassion that would become legendary, accompanied his friend to the barrens of Kentucky, near present-day Glasgow. At their parting, a small crisis arose. Holiday had lost his hunting knife, an essential tool for wilderness survival. Without hesitation, Spencer snapped his own knife in two, sharing half with his departing friend. It was the last act of kindness Holiday would receive. He vanished on the journey home, likely falling prey to hostile warriors. Spencer returned to Bledsoe's Lick alone. As winter descended on the Cumberland Valley, he took up residence in a massive hollow sycamore tree near what would become Castellan Springs. This natural shelter, which would later be known as Spencer's House, became the first home of Middle Tennessee's most legendary pioneer. The massive sycamore that sheltered Spencer through that lonely winter stood as a testament to frontier ingenuity until its eventual decay decades later. But Spencer's time in this natural fortress was far from idle. Day after day, he ventured forth into the wilderness, mapping the vast territory from Bledsoe's Lick to the mouth of Red River near present-day Clarksville. His keen eyes noted every promising tract of land, every fertile valley, every strategic location that might one day support a homestead. In 1780, after a brief return to his native Virginia, Spencer came back to the Cumberland country with grand ambitions. His understanding of the preemption laws, albeit mistaken, drove him to undertake a massive land acquisition project. He believed that by clearing land and building cabins on multiple 640-acre sections, he could claim as much territory as he could work. With characteristic determination, he selected 4 prime tracts in Sumner County, focusing his efforts on the rich lands around Castellan Springs and near what would become Gallatin. The wilderness seemed to bend to Spencer's will as he worked. His superhuman strength allowed him to accomplish the work of several men. Each swing of his axe bit deep into ancient trees. Each shoulder load of timber would have staggered ordinary men. He cleared land, built rudimentary cabins, and marked his territory with the confidence of a man who believed the land would be his. However, in 1781, North Carolina, which then controlled the Middle Tennessee Territory, shattered Spencer's dreams of a vast land empire. The state's newly enacted preemption law limited claims to a single 640-acre section per qualified settler, whether family head or single man over 21. Faced with this legal reality, Spencer had to choose among his 4 carefully selected tracts. He settled on the parcel near Gallatin, a choice so wise that the land would forever after bear the name Spencer's Choice, becoming one of the most coveted properties in the region. Spencer's physical presence matched his outsized ambitions. Standing broad-shouldered and well-proportioned, despite his tremendous 400-pound frame, he moved with surprising grace for a man of his size. His strength became legendary among the settlers, with stories of his feats passing from cabin to cabin across the frontier. One such tale unfolded on the banks of Duck River, in what would later become Humphreys County. Spencer and a companion were setting up camp for the evening, the smell of venison beginning to rise from their cooking fire, when disaster struck. Indian warriors who had crept within range under cover of dusk opened fire. Spencer's companion fell dead. Without hesitation, Spencer scooped up not only his dead friend's body, but also both their guns and ammunition. Despite this enormous burden, a load that would have immobilized most men, he crashed through the thick canebrake with such speed and power that his pursuers could only follow at a safe distance, wary of the 2 loaded rifles he carried. After ensuring his own safety, Spencer returned to give his fallen companion a proper burial before making his way back to French Lick. John Carr, a respected pioneer chronicler of Sumner County's early history, witnessed first-hand evidence of Spencer's legendary strength. Riding through a clearing Spencer had worked, Carr marveled at the rail fence surrounding 5 or 6 acres. Each timber in that fence, Carr noted, was the size of 10 to 15 normal rails, logs so massive they should have required a team of men to move. Yet Spencer had single-handedly cut these giants and carried them on his shoulders to build the fence. These feats of strength weren't mere showing off. They were necessary adaptations to frontier life. Every log carried, every cabin built, every acre cleared represented another step in transforming wilderness into civilization. Spencer's extraordinary physical capabilities allowed him to work at the pace required by his ambitious plans, even if those plans eventually had to be scaled back due to legal restrictions. The land Spencer cleared and the boundaries he established helped lay the groundwork for Tennessee's future development. His careful selection of properties, even though he could only keep one tract, demonstrated his understanding of the land's potential. Spencer's choice became more than just a property name. It represented the judgment of a man who had walked every inch of the territory and understood its true value. Even in sickness, Spencer's legendary strength could not be contained. One day, while fighting a fever and confined to his blanket near a cabin construction site, he watched two settlers struggle with a massive log. Their faces reddened with effort as they attempted again and again to lift the heavy timber into place. Unable to bear their frustration any longer, Spencer rose from his sickbed, brushed aside their protests, and with one fluid motion hoisted the log into position as if it were nothing more than a fallen branch. His physical presence left lasting impressions wherever he went. Spencer's footprints in the soft earth near Bledsoe's Lick became the stuff of frontier legend. On a rainy morning at daybreak, while pursuing a buffalo herd past Timothy Damon Brune's trading station, Spencer unknowingly created a story that would be told for generations. A French hunter, awakened by the commotion and stepping out to investigate, came upon Spencer's enormous footprint in the rain-softened mud. The sight so terrified the man that he dove into the Cumberland River, swimming across its wide waters, and fled northward through the wilderness. He didn't stop until he reached the French settlement at Vincennes, where he swore he'd never return to a land inhabited by such giants. Yet for all his imposing size and strength, Spencer was known throughout the settlements as a gentleman of quiet disposition. His good looks and refined manners stood in stark contrast to his massive frame. Those who knew him spoke of his gentle nature, his readiness to help others, and his unfailing courtesy. Like the legendary Daniel Boone, Spencer found his truest peace in the solitude of the forest. Even in times when Indian attacks were frequent and deadly, he would venture alone into the wilderness for weeks at a time, seemingly immune to fear. His solitary hunting expeditions often proved crucial to the settlement's survival. During times of scarcity, Spencer would emerge from the forest with game to feed hungry families. Though he never married or established a permanent home after the settlements grew in Sumner and Davidson counties, his presence provided security to vulnerable outposts. He made it his practice to spend nights at stations most likely to face Indian attacks, his very presence deterring potential raiders. Fate's final call came to Spencer in the autumn of 1793. Having returned to Virginia to claim an inheritance, he was journeying back to Tennessee with a party traveling through Knoxville. True to his independent nature, Spencer rode ahead of the group as they approached the headwaters of Caney Fork River. The elevation they reached would soon bear his name, Spencer's Hill, though for tragic reasons. As he approached a gap near the hill's summit, riding alone as was his custom, Spencer could not know that hostile warriors lay in wait. The crack of rifles shattered the morning calm. The giant who had survived countless dangers, who had lifted impossible weights and outrun pursuing warriors, fell from his mount, instantly killed by the ambusher's bullets. His magnificent horse, startled by its master's fall, demonstrated a survival instinct worthy of its owner. As whooping warriors closed in, the animal burst through their line, thundering back down the trail to alert the rest of the party. The horse's escape denied the warriors their prize, but Tennessee had lost one of its greatest pioneers. Spencer's death marked the end of an era. In all the chronicles of early Tennessee history, no figure better embodied the combination of physical prowess and moral character that the frontier demanded. His legendary strength, proven in countless feats and attested to by witnesses throughout the settlements, was matched only by his gentle spirit and unwavering courage. He had blazed trails, protected settlements, fed the hungry, and helped transform wilderness into civilization, all without seeking glory or recognition. The gap where Spencer fell became a monument to his memory, but his true legacy lived on in the stories told around settler fires, in the lands he had explored and protected, and in the example he set of how great strength could be paired with greater kindness. In the annals of frontier history, Few stories shine as brightly as that of the gentle giant who gave his life helping to forge a new territory in the wilderness. Spencer's arrival at Bledsoe's Lick marked a turning point in Tennessee's story. From the solitary hunter sleeping in a hollow tree to the respected protector of frontier settlements, his journey embodied the transformation of the wilderness itself. His legendary strength moved logs that would stagger teams of oxen, while his gentle spirit earned the respect of every settler he met. In the untamed lands of Tennessee and Kentucky, where northern and southern tribes maintained an uneasy peace in their shared hunting grounds, Spencer carved out a place in history. The Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, and Chickasaw peoples of the South and the Iroquois nations of the North had long known these territories as contested ground. Among these ancient tribal rivalries, Spencer and the early settlers wrote their own chapter in blood and courage. That chapter ended at Spencer's Hill, where a giant fell to an Indian's bullet. But his footprints remained, in the lands he explored, in the settlements he protected, and in the stories passed down through generations. The 400-pound frontiersman who could carry a dead man and 2 rifles through dense forest, who broke his only knife in half to help a friend, who spent countless nights guarding vulnerable stations from attack, left a legacy as large as his legendary frame. That's our story for today on Native Legends and History Stories. If you enjoyed learning about Tennessee's gentle giant, hit subscribe and join our community of history enthusiasts. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Spencer's remarkable life. Until next time, remember, real history lives in the stories of real people.